So welcome to our webinar. This is our webinar on taking back control of your infrastructure with a focus on private cloud and Baremetal. Today I am, well, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris. I run customer success for the Cycle team. Been with the team now for almost 8 years. Joining me today is Mark and Bruce from nvisia and Jake from our team, our CEO and founder. I'll go ahead and let Mark go ahead and introduce yourself first there.
Yeah, thanks. Pleasure to be involved in this great webinar today. So Mark Pantover, I head up our DevOps Cloud and AI Lab at nvisia. So I'll talk a little bit more about background in a minute, but I will yield at this point to the next person.
Yes, I'm Bruce Smith. I do DevOps here at nvisia, working on Mark's team. I've been pretty busy the last 4 or 5 years helping our clients move into cloud platforms like Azure, GCP, AWS, all those fun ones. But I've been boots on the ground at nvisia here, moving our internal applications over to Cycle and kind of away from some of those larger cloud providers. So excited to be here today. Thanks, Chris.
And finally, I think most of the people on the call I've met, although it looks like there's a few people here that I don't know. So anyone who I've not met yet before, nice to meet you. My name is Jake. I'm the founder of Cycle, and excited to be able to dive in. This is the first webinar that we've hosted in quite a while. And so as we bring the company back to kind of a focus on builders as our primary effort, I'm excited to do more of these. So kicking off with Mark and Bruce is very exciting to me. And so as we start to kick off, so I'm going to do a quick, for people who have not ever heard of Cycle before, I'm going to do a kind of a quick overview of Cycle before I hand it over to the nvisia team, so that way they can show how they've used Cycle in their use case, but just a little high-level context. First, what is Cycle? So Cycle is a platform that was built for teams and companies that are building platforms. And so 90% of our customers today are companies that are building a SaaS offering or a multi-tenancy platform in one way or another. Those companies are industry agnostic. We don't have any specific industry that Cycle seems to do the best with. We have companies that, whether it's developer tooling, whether it's healthcare, fintech, e-commerce, does not seem to matter about industry with the companies that are building on top of Cycle. The biggest thing is just, do they have multi-tenancy? Do they want to mix and match infrastructure? Do they want to be able to work at multiple clouds or across clouds? And so that's kind of the general theme of our customers today. And then one of the other points that I want to mention is that with Cycle, you can scale with your growth. So whether you're starting with just a couple of VMs on a host just to get comfortable, or we have companies today that are running hundreds of bare metal machines with the platform. So it's a platform that can work for both small use cases all the way up to where you need to run tens of thousands of containers or even hundreds of thousands of containers at scale. And so why Cycle? At the end of the day, we believe that builders should spend more time building. And so with Cycle, that gives you, with Cycle, you have a control plane that allows you to be, again, multi-cloud, deploy any type of infrastructure, regardless of whether it's virtual machines or bare metal. You can connect any of that scattered infrastructure, even including home labs or servers that might be sitting in a local rack. You can deploy containers, virtual machines, and functions, same API and control plane, even though that might be to different providers. And then finally, there's a lot of built-in automation tools, whether that's pipelines or stacks or Rainbow deployments. There's a lot of primitives and building blocks that just come with the platform from day one that are useful in helping builders spend more time building and less time maintaining. So the main purpose of today's webinar, as seeing, I think I just lost my microphone.
We can hear you and see you, I think.
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry about that. I moved my microphone and it came unplugged. So, so the main purpose behind today's webinar is to talk about private cloud and bare metal. It's something that we, as a company, have been seeing a huge growing interest in from a number of the companies that have been reaching out to us. There's a number of reasons behind that. So I'd like to dive into a couple of those reasons from a kind of high level perspective. And then we'll turn it over to Mark and Bruce for them to be able to show how they are currently using Cycle to do just that. So,
hey Jake.
Yes.
So one thing real quick. It was just something that stuck out to me. We're talking about bare metal. And so I think just to let folks on the call know, that doesn't mean that doesn't necessarily mean that you're racking and stacking. I don't know if you want to talk about that real quick. So, I mean, there's been a lot of providers that came on, like, virtual providers for that as well, right? Like Vulture, et cetera. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we talk about bare metal, that is any compute that is not running any virtualization as part of that host. So whether that is, to Mark's point, a bare metal server sitting over at Vulture, where you're using a cloud-like API to get a bare metal machine, or whether you are actually using colo infrastructure and you're doing all the racking and stacking yourself. Whenever for us we talk about bare metal, it is simply the fact that you're getting raw compute with no virtualization involved, and you just have kind of those resources at your disposal. But so as we talk about kind of the pivot to private cloud and bare metal, why are companies doing that today? So number one is the fact that companies want better control and ownership over their data, especially with a lot of the geopolitical issues that are currently happening in the world. And a lot of companies are starting to spend a lot more time thinking about getting those those data and applications within their own boundaries. And then next is being able to mix and match infrastructure. So whether you want to be able to have some cloud assets for like batch processing and things like that, but you want to have bare metal for high performance at a lower price. There's a lot of benefits that can come in there. And then with Cycle, and this is one of the reasons why we've had so much success with bare metal, is that companies can have a cloud-like experience still on top of their bare metal. So as I dive a little bit deeper into these, so I talked briefly about data ownership and control, and so especially over here in Europe, it's becoming a very big concern. One of the most kind of pressing things that has happened about this is that the EU passed a new data law that comes into effect in 2027 that pretty much stipulates that if you are a SaaS company, you need to be able to give your users reasonable you need to be able to give your users the reasonable choice of where they want to run their applications. And so suddenly companies that have been like a SaaS company that have been all in on AWS or GCP, et cetera, are now being forced to say, well, we might actually need to support more providers instead of it being kind of just a single buy-in. So there's that component of it. Obviously, the physical, as we talk about bare metal, the physical separation of your data versus cloud-like environment. There's a lot of value there. And then, as I kind of before about cost reduction, we've had a number of companies that have switched over from traditional virtual machines on top of AWS, like EC2, over to bare metal. And we have companies now that are saying, hey, I'm getting 4 to 5 times the performance, 4 to 5 times the resources for half the price, or obviously that's going to be different depending on which providers you're talking about. But organizations are typically finding that they can get significantly better density at a significantly better cost on top of bare metal. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to Mark and Bruce, or if there's any questions, I guess I need to check the QA thread. It looks like no questions yet. But yeah, I'd like to turn it over to Mark and Bruce.
Yeah, and while I'm switching over the screen here, I want to clean this up a little bit, and then I think I got it right. Good. So, one other thing that I was just going to mention has to do with that last bit. We were talking about that, where you are on a common hypervisor like AWS, Azure, GCP, that proposition, we've definitely seen that bear itself as, but probably 2 to 5 times as much when it comes to GPUs with AI. So that was actually a little bit of our journey. I didn't call it out really specifically, but I'll kind of bring that in as some color as we move forward here. So just real quick, again, for a lot of folks on the call that haven't heard from us, I'm not here to sell you nvisia, but I want you to understand we're like a real deal. So we are a regional consulting company headquartered in Chicago in the US here. And we have about 150 plus, about around 150 consultants. And many of them have been here. The majority, I think the average is over 10 years. So we are not a, kind of churn and kind of chop. We're very focused on our craft at nvisia. We don't have any 1099s. They're all employees, et cetera. So that's where Bruce and I, come from. We service a lot of customers. As you look through here, I think if you're on the call and you're a customer and your logo's not here, blame our marketing department. But and again, the idea here isn't really to call it out. It's just basically like the types of organizations that we work with at scale. So some are much smaller, with very, that actually are really new to kind of custom app development kind of things. And some are massive, GE Healthcare, Aon Corporation, right? Be a couple of examples of ones that I've actually personally worked with. And as far as it goes with Bruce and I, within that, all the great things that we do at nvisia, we're in the DevOps platform engineering. That's really where our discussion's coming from. I also work, again, I head up our AI lab. So for myself, I have a pretty extensive container background. So I've been working in the container landscape. I actually wrote a book, Mastering Docker Enterprise, like 8,000 years ago, when containers were new. And so it was like 2018, but same thing. So anyway, I'm also involved in the IEEE DevOps Standards Committee, as well as an advisor at Milwaukee School of Engineering for their software engineering and DevOps area. So how in the world did we get mixed up with Cycle, you might ask yourself? So it actually came through really, we have these like credible relationships, and one of the Docker captains that I've kind of worked with and known for a long time, Brett Fisher, has a great podcast that I like to catch when I can. And I actually caught it live, which was really unusual for me. A lot of times I'm playing it back later. And there was this guy on there named Jake from Cycle.io, and he was talking about his stuff, right? And this is several years ago, probably 3 at least, Jake, I'm thinking. So, and what it really started was getting me thinking about, and by the way, at the point, obviously we're heavily into Kubernetes at scale with a lot of customers, et cetera. It got me really thinking about, what are some reasonable alternatives, because it's just, it can be overwhelming. So long and short, Jake and Connor and the team kept me in the loop, kind of like what they were working on. It was great collaborative sessions, kind of picking my brain a little bit, getting my reaction to stuff as well. It was really cool. And then, VMs. So my first thing was like, oh, wait, this VMs on-prem bare metal. I'm like, okay, now this is getting really personal, because we have our own problems internally in our IT group to be solving. And so that, so Jake's announcement last May 14th, that was talking about the virtual providers and virtual machines. That was a big deal for us. So that really got us thinking. And so we got involved with trying some things out. And that's where I wanted to throw in. One of the things that I wanted to test out, because of my role heading up our AI lab, was being able to spin up and working with the great folks at Vultr. And again, some people, if you hear about people as a hypervisor sort of platform, Vultr has a kind of mixed reviews. They've been working fast, expanding, doing stuff. But on the bare metal side, everything I saw was rock solid, and just putting that out there. And then working with Jake to get to bring on. So we had an 8-way H100 NVIDIA Linux box that we brought into the platform, and was able to start to, I could run some pretty massive models and do some things. That was really exciting. So just to say that aspect, as I brought up earlier, there's a forcing function around GPU costs where you are from a hypervisor going to be paying at least 10x what you would if you owned it. On the downside, you got to keep them busy, right? If you're not using them continuously, right, then the math doesn't work so great. So anyway, so we jumped in, particularly when you got into the Ceph SAN storage bit. It's like, okay, like this is now we're ready to commit to that after we did some playing around with it. So the main thing, like secure private networks, for us, that's like a huge deal. We run into so many people running containers in sort of half-baked ways and exposing endpoints and doing terrible things. The ability to run a VM next to a container, that's super important. That bare metal support. Originally, Jake had things run. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, just real quick.
Sure.
One of the challenges that we run into is a lot of our clients are running, Windows applications and things like that. So when we get into the cloud and we do things like, traditionally, we've done a lot of Kubernetes implementations and stuff like that. Windows doesn't work so great, in those environments. So this is really a spot where Cycle is exciting to us to be able to have Windows applications running right next to containers, which is cool. So
yeah, and again, the external storage bit is important because when we look at VMs and containers, they're ephemeral, and so typically, if we're doing it right, so we want to have a way of being able to manage that persistent data. But yeah, from us, when we look at who needs it, well, we did. You're looking at our IT department there, right? That's me and Chris. Okay, so he's real busy. And he doesn't have time to screw around every time a consultant wants to deploy something to these environments. And the other thing was our clients. We're a very client-focused organization. And if we're going to learn something, we want to see, we're not really going to invest in it or our time in that if we don't think it can help our customers. So modernization, as Bruce just talked about, a lot of people afraid of containers that are working with Microsoft workloads, old Windows, bloated monolithic Windows apps that they're now trying to move to microservices. And that's not an easy problem to solve, to create like a seamless environment to start following the strangler pattern of carving bits off, et cetera. The other thing was just like we run into a lot of folks that, and usually this is firefighting. It's like, can you come in and save our bacon, please? Because the guy that built our cluster left 2 years ago. So there's a lot of organizations where the folks that built really passionate about Kubernetes are no longer available. Either they left the group, the company, et cetera. So that's a big deal. And then the other thing, I mean, you should be containerizing workloads. If you're building software and delivering software and you're not using containers, I don't know how you're going to do it effectively in scale. So you need to, you can't just run away from it. You can for a little while, but you're going to crush under the weight, and the old, doesn't work on my machine fun game we often play. So, and then the VMware. The last bit here was the VMware crunch. For us, the clients are seeing this as well as we felt the same problems. And to that, our before environment, we had stacks of our own HP ProLiant boxes running in our small data center at our office. And so we were using initially VMware. We cut over to Proxmox and realized, wow, that's not easy either. But it's not bad. I'm not going to say anything bad about Proxmox. But what I'm going to say, there certainly is that tax that working with it requires cognitive load and learning, et cetera. And then we put Kubernetes on top of it. So we had all this stuff running in our data center, and we had to constantly maintain and go through things, and it was very onerous. So we said, oh, you know what we'll do? We're going to move to Azure because we've developed something called Digital Foundations. Let me put my Digital Foundations hat on for a minute. We have a hat, so it's a thing. Anyway, so we fired it up, which is it's great, especially when you're moving as an enterprise at scale. And we actually support it on Azure, AWS, and we now have an implementation running on GCP. So, but the problem there is a small application is like $1,500 by the time you get your firewall and all the things going. And I don't know, just a little inside thing. Bruce Smith is like really cheap, and he's seeing these bills and he's like, dude, we should be doing this some other way. So Anyway, so then, obviously we'd have the conversations with Cycle. And so we started taking a look at, okay, let's stop the madness. Let's handle our internal applications and the custom built apps that we're doing for internal use. And let's use Cycle to go after those. So going through that, so some things we ran through real quick here, were really getting into really making sure our network was good. So, the backstory, we moved office locations about 2 years ago, and we knew that we had pivoted over to Azure. So we really were kind of lazy. And when our new space had not set up all of our networking, really much more than just a campus network, the typical firewall, et cetera, but nothing too fancy. So once we were doing this, we actually backed up Chris, the IT guy I showed before. He dove in and started building out our network, segmentation, setting up our VLANs, et cetera. So we ran through things there, layer 2, layer 3, and getting everything set up. So that was one part of our journey as we kind of moved from that play around with it to committing and doing it. The other bit was when we were talking about Ceph storage for persistent storage for the external volumes for VMs and containers. We needed more speed. So there are rumors that 10 gigabit networks are like 10 times faster than gigabit networks. It's crazy. So we obviously want to have reasonable performance there. So that was one bit of doing it. And again, you can go further than that by a long shot, right? As folks that are network and data center savvy. So the other part that was amazing to me was going into the Cycle portal, working with Jake. He's kind of talking me through my first run on this with a virtual provider, set up my ISO, downloaded it, put it on a USB, made it bootable, and plugged it into one of our HP machines and fired it up. And it showed up in the Cycle portal. I moved it out of quarantine, told it where I wanted to provision it to, which environment, and away it went. So that was really, I'm going to say super cool, if I can use some technical terminology in this group. So the other part was networking, right? So the kind of the edge. So we are, well, I said our network was simple. We're also fairly paranoid as we try to encourage our customers to be as well. So we have everything running. Every bit of edge traffic is coming through Cloudflare. So the idea is you can't just get into our network even if you want, right? So, and Bruce will talk a little bit more about this, but the edge, we're in a tunnel and working off of the Cloudflare zero trust architecture. And just a little different picture of that is this, kind of looking at anything coming in from the outside, and our external public DNS as well, managed and hosted within Cloudflare, coming into our Cycle private network. And, for full disclosure, it also is going into AWS and Azure at this point. So we don't have that. We're not doing a lot there with GCP for our own stuff at this point. But we do definitely support multiple environments. That's the way in. And then obviously we have the network components, and Bruce will talk a little bit more about that when he talks about our stacks and the great stuff that we've got. But we have these ephemeral sort of containers and VMs running that need some storage, persistent storage backing across them. And so that's what we used Ceph for. So what I want to do is turn it over to Bruce at this point, and he's going to walk us through the current internal apps environment, get into some detail there, and then walk us through the development pipelines, DNS, et cetera. So this is one thing. If you, as you're going through, if you have any kind of question, please do feel free to pop it into the chat. We would love to hear from you. This is where we're going to, take this into a little bit more fluid discussion as well. So, so that is it. Bruce, you want to share and take it from there?
Sure thing. So let me kick that off here. All right. So what we have here is a very simple development environment for our internal apps. And right now I have essentially one application deployed. It's got a PHP front end and a MySQL back end for the database. And then on top of that, we have some general networking bits, which is our Cloudflare tunnel running here in this environment. And then this DevOps utils is like a node deployment where, I can go in and do things like network testing or, I don't know, just troubleshooting anything I might want to do to, inside of a container in the environment that has direct access to the other containers. So that's really just a, utility mechanism that I have because I'm a DevOps guy and I don't know, I like to get in and be in the environment and have fun in there. So anyway, very, very simplistic setup here. And that's kind of on purpose because I don't want there to be a lot of noise when I'm kind of showing how we set up an individual application. A couple of real quick notes. I know a lot of people on the call are already familiar with Cycle, so I don't want this to be a tutorial on how to use Cycle or any of that, but just a couple of highlights of features that I really like about the platform here. So if we're looking at like my singular application here, which is this ticketing app for our IT team, one of the really nice things I can do here with logs is I can just search the logs. So this is really nice functionality. I didn't have to go wire up a Datadog tool or some sort of external logging mechanism. I don't have to set up TickStack or ElkStack or any of that fun stuff, right? I kind of get some of these nice features just right out of the box with Cycle, so that's super nice. Another thing I like is just the quick ability to be able to gain, shell access into these containers. I don't have to go into any firewall and poke holes for port 22. I don't have to set up SSH and run that on my machine or on my instance, I should say. You'll actually see here is my ports. I don't even have 22 exposed or even running inside the container. So just some real nice like convenience things that I get with the Cycle platform that I really like. So that is kind of the end game here. Well, how did we get here from a DevOps perspective, right? So like I can come in, you can make this as simple or more complex as you want, but I have an old school way, or not old school way of thinking, but an alternative way of thinking coming into Cycle where everything was just Kubernetes, right? So I had to kind of unlearn Kubernetes a little bit, even though there's a lot of there's a lot of similarities with the end result, but how you get there is definitely a bit different. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be utilizing Cycle deployments, and Cycle deployments have versions and tags, and there's some cool stuff you can do with that, like internal DNS, and even if you wanted to use Cycle to host your DNS and expose certain workloads, you can do that as well. So I really like the deployment mechanism, and that rolls into the pipeline part of things. So when I want to go do a deployment, I run a Cycle pipeline, and it basically rolls out the existing current running deployment, and it will replace it with a new version, and then cut that over seamlessly. So very similar to like maybe a Kubernetes, and I apologize for referring to Kubernetes so much, but that's kind of where I come from. So very similar to like a Kubernetes rollout, deployment rollout. I will say one of the things that was a little bit more of a learning curve to me was actually building out the pipeline. So like with Kubernetes, you just replace like the manifest and then it does it. With Cycle, I kind of had to tell it how to do it. And that's kind of cool also because, this isn't the only way to obviously build a pipeline and deploy things out. I'm sure, Chris, Jake, you guys have seen all kinds of pipelines and various methodologies on how to do it. And you might even look at this one and say, this is dumb. Why are you doing it that way? You should look and see if you could do it this way, right? So there's no
this would be
one
a good
way
time to do that. Actually, yeah.
Yeah, there's no one
That
way
doesn't
to
sound
do
like
it.
something Jake or I would say, does it?
No. Well, maybe Jake. So I would I love his honesty. It's good. But Bruce, also the API, right? So I mean, there's lots of ways to interact, right, with the platform.
Yep. So each one of these I could go and put into like I don't know, GitHub Actions or some other mechanism and kind of kick these off and do anything I can do basically on this UI is exposed with the APIs. So I can certainly do that, and I'll show in a minute. I actually do kick this pipeline off with a API call from an Azure DevOps pipeline, and actually I have it in a bookmark here. But Cycle has an official GitHub Actions pipeline runner too. So if you don't want to write your own, do all that, you can kind of get started with pipelining very quickly with Cycle's GitHub Actions tool. But anyway, yeah, it's a good call out, Mark. So like if I wanted to not use this pipeline directly, I could go and do, I'm sure, have a little bit more granular action on things just using the pipeline straight up. So just having that ability to do that, you know, if there was a need or a specific use case, it is nice. The other thing here is, you know, I do have a cleanup step here, so I don't want to keep all my old containers laying around forever. So I just kind of prune some things out as I no longer need them. My current train of thought is if I needed to roll back or wanted to go back to a previous rollout, I would go kick off, I would go put a tag or kick off something with a branching strategy in my repo as opposed to necessarily doing it via cycle. That being said, very easy to just come in here and kick off, you know, a bespoke deployment if, you know, break glass or whatever you wanted to do. You know, you could just do it via the UI, so you don't have to necessarily go to all the effort to have some external pipeline tool to kick this off. I know Chris was shaking his head when I was first starting this and hitting him up because he's like, why are you making this more complicated than it needs to be? And I was like, well, because I'm a DevOps guy, that's why.
Yeah, you did great.
So this pipeline here, if I just go to settings, like it has an ID, right? So I can use this ID to trigger the pipeline with trigger keys. And that takes me over into my Azure DevOps pipeline. For the sake of this, demo, I don't want to get too much in the weeds and show a lot of YAML because everyone will go to sleep. But the big pieces here are I have everything in change control, as well as my application. I do a Docker build and I push up to Docker Hub, which is where nvisia keeps our images in our organization in Docker Hub. And then once I have the image built and pushed up there and available, I go ahead and trigger that pipeline that I just showed you with the ID of the pipeline. Actually, that's the job. But anyway, so I can obviously, you know, I can take the output of this API call and I can do things with it, like, you know, I can make this pipeline more fancy and have it track in case my cycle pipeline ran into an error or something. I can have it report back on that and actually fail this pipeline. So again, you can get kind of as crazy as you want to get. But when I'm running this, at least at this stage in our journey, I just hop back over to the cycle portal and follow along there. So if I were to come back over here, I would see, you know, the piece that I'm deploying, and I would see that there is a, you know, a pipeline running, and I can go in and view the steps and whether or not it succeeds and all that fun stuff. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that part, but I'm basically kicking off a pipeline from Azure DevOps. I've done this with GitHub Actions as well. The other thing that's important to mention here is I am leveraging stacks. So a stack is, I'm going to refer Kubernetes a little bit, but a stack is similar to what you would look at in Kubernetes, like a deployment manifest, right? So if I'm taking a look at the stack that I have for this particular application, you'll see that I have like a containers object, and then inside of there I have my OS ticket container. In this example, I only have one container, but I could have 4 or 5, you know, whatever supporting containers that I might have for this application. They do have support for dynamic variables, which is very nice. I leverage that. So I can go and, you know, use the same stack over and over again, even though the image and maybe some details in here is changing. Again, don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but they do have some things that you might see that's familiar with if you've worked with Kubernetes, where we can do health checks, we can put environment variables. So again, just I really like the idea of keeping our container definitions in code with change control. That's just kind of a preference that I have.
And I do want to mention that for anyone who might be watching this that prefers YAML over JSON, these stack files can be YAML as well. So you can prefer whichever markup tool, or not markup.
I
Pick your
actually am
poison.
going to
Yes.
be converting to YAML, because with YAML you can actually leave comments, and JSON you can't. And I find that to be very helpful sometimes, to just be able to drop a comment and it's like, here's, like, for instance, like this source ID may not, to somebody that, like, I leave the company or I get hit by a bus and then Mark has to manage this. Mark might go in and be like, what the heck is that ID, right? So there might be some value with YAML being able to add comments where things might make sense.
The other question that I have that would be nice to get a little bit. So I know that before Cycle you used Azure. How was the process of implementing that pipeline into your Azure workflow?
Yeah, very simple. I mean, it's just a curl call really to the API. So I mean, let me go over here and edit the pipeline. So I do all my fun stuff, and then here, I build up my arguments that I need for the payload, and then I'm doing the trigger endpoint here. So I mean, as far as before, what this might have been was a Kubernetes task, right? And it would have done a customized bake and deploy, and that would have pushed it out to Kubernetes. So I literally just deleted that task and then dropped this one in, and now I'm deploying out to Cycle. So I think that's what you're asking, Jake. I mean, it was very simple to just swap that out.
But because you were able to just swap it out here, you're able to still use the existing workflow that you had before.
In terms of branching strategy and releasing code.
Yeah, well, just like, I know that your team is very familiar with Azure, and so being able to just extend Azure at that point, that was something that did not require everyone on your team to suddenly have to learn a new process.
No, absolutely not. Nope. It was just plug and play. Again, just replacing just a simple replacing a task. So instead of pushing to Kubernetes, push out here. Now, if I wanted to, I could push it both to Kubernetes and here. So if I wanted to, for whatever reason, have it in multiple places, I could do that. But pick your poison. But yes, it was very simple to drop this in to deploy out the Cycle. I will say, I do have, you may notice I have my stacks over here in GitHub, and I have like the pipeline and my code and everything over in Azure DevOps. There's like a limitation in Cycle that I ran into where I can't pull. Cycle's not able to pull the stack from Azure DevOps because I think the underlying Git API mechanism on Azure DevOps isn't compatible or whatever. So that's really the reason why I have them in two spots. But it really doesn't matter what your runner is, I don't think. You could wire this in with Jenkins. You could wire this in with anything that you're using to deploy your code today. So pretty easy to get it in there.
Makes sense.
Okay, so, and then you'll notice here too, maybe if you have the keen eye, I am referring to the stack here that I have declared here. So it all kind of wires together, and then what this ultimately does is kick off that pipeline back in Cycle, which is this guy here. And it will go and roll out my, with my new image, right? It'll roll out my new version of my application. So that's the deployment part of what I have here. Do we have a question?
Yeah, Bruce, before we move on, so there's a question here that says, as you're talking about deployments, the question is, Kubernetes folks love to kube control deploy from their local CLIs and do rollbacks, and the version in quotes ends up being a single int that's not visible in any CI/CD log. What does deploying look like in Cycle? Okay,
so yeah, so just like, well, I mean, ultimately you come here, you have an entire history, right? So there's no way that you could, I guess you could go into the, into your environment and go and delete a container and things like that. But again, there's just table stakes. It's out of the box with Cycle. Everything is audited. I think, Jake, you deleted one of my, you deleted something of mine a few days ago, and I was like, that Jake guy in there deleting stuff. But
I was cleaning it up.
He and I, I was with him at the time, so it's like he wasn't just going rogue on us.
But it is like, and I was working with a client just a few weeks ago. It was like, hey, you have a public endpoint out there, a public IP, public load balancer. What's up with that? Well, somebody went and ran kubectl from their local machine, and they deployed a service, a load balancer service, and then Azure went and created a public load balancer, um, next to the cluster. And so there's things like that that I think, with this particular bit, yeah, if there's access controls and everything like that, so the trigger keys and everything like that can be locked down. I think for nvisia's use case, it's like Mark and I are in here at this moment, so there's not really a big need to implement that level of control at this point anyway. But there's all kinds of mechanisms that you can do with Cycle and with the auditing that might alleviate some of those worries about a developer or engineer or whatever just going in and willy-nilly rolling deployments out.
Yeah, and just a sidebar, do not let people do that. And then they also built the image locally and shoved it out. I mean, there's just so many problems with that. But yeah, if you're a really small company and there's one person doing all of your DevOps and that's how they're doing it, that's one thing. But even there, it's difficult for them to understand what they did when sometimes. So pipelines are way better. Yeah, go ahead.
We just had another question come in that is, any idea when we are going to have Cycle CLI to rule them all? It was so we started building a CLI a few months ago. Actually, almost probably like 8 or 9 months ago at this point. And it's weird because like we thought it was going to be something that everyone wanted. But it's interesting because people like during the initial adoption phase of Cycle, like I would love a CLI, and then no one ever talks about it ever again. But that being said, we still think it's a great idea. So as more and more people ask for it, it becomes prioritized on our roadmap. But so far, again, everything we do in the company is prioritized based off of asks, how many people are asking for something. And so we spent most of the last few months abstracting storage and networking. So if CLI is at the top of your feature asks, please drop it to our Slack or in the cycle.io/community. And that way we have an idea of who wants it, and then we can prioritize accordingly. I will say that we do have a repo where it's probably like half done. So it has been started.
What are you guys calling the CLI command?
I think just Cycle is what it's built to so far. But the idea for the CLI initially, at least what was in the initial, I don't want to say proof of concept for it, but like the initial roadmap was just being able to make it easier for people to do a couple things. Number one, deploy locally. Number two, be able to join their machine into a Cycle environment more easily. And then three, being able to have easy SSH access. And so, eventually being a full-featured CLI, but kind of starting there seemed to make the most sense. I know that was a little bit of a deviation, but good question.
Okay, so real quick here, since we're getting a little short on time, I want to talk a little bit about the Cloudflare implementation that we did to kind of expose our applications and for some of our kind of VPN replacement type bits. Again, you get a lot of this stuff out of the box with Cycle. If you just want to use the Cycle tools, we love Cloudflare, and we've utilized that across a lot of different environments that we have. So we just wanted to see if we could stick with that, and it's been working out really well, actually. So real quick, let's go back to the environment that I have here with my OS ticket container here. And actually, if I go to deployments, because I have it tied, you'll see that I have like this domain tied to this particular deployment, or right now I only have one instance, but I might have 10, whatever. So that's set up over here in the DNS zones. And you'll notice this is a not hosted zone, meaning this is not like I don't have my name servers pointed to this. This is basically an internal to the Cycle environment. This is an internal DNS zone. And then inside of here, I've created a record. I can call this whatever I want. So because I'm pointing to the OS Ticket app in my dev environment, I call it OS Ticket Dev, and I can link, I could create CNAMEs or A records, all that type of stuff, but I'm using a linked record in this case, and I'm linking it to a very specific environment. very specific deployment with a very specific tag on it, right? So one of the things that I think, and I was just kind of chatting with Mark the other day about this, that might be cool is, you know, you could potentially do things on a per developer basis. So if you have developers that need to deploy and test their applications and things out, I don't know, Jake, if you guys have customers already doing that, but I think that would be a pretty powerful way to do it. Yep. So you could tag your, you know, deployments in your pipeline as like, you know, Bruce Smith or whatever, and then you can have your own. Basically, you can have your own like host names and everything like that to test out only your branch or your flavor of your app. So that's a pretty powerful thing. Doing that in Kubernetes or something like that can be a lot of overhead.
We have some companies that take it even a step further, and every single PR gets its own deployment. So that way, from their GitLab or their GitHub, they can click a link and immediately have visibility to their own, you know, to whatever that PR is. So they can just test they can test a PR specifically inside of that own deployment.
Do those get cleaned up when you merge? Or do you just have like a million
well, yeah, I mean, so in Cycle, we have a pipeline step called prune, and the second you remove a tag from a deployment, we can prune it automatically for you. So many times that's the last step of the pipeline, is to remove the tag when you no longer need it, and then prune accordingly.
Yeah, and just for the folks on the call too, like, you know, this is pretty simplistic implementation, just starting to get our feet wet a little bit with some of this stuff. So, you know, but I can see like the capabilities and like the possibilities of really making this a robust, you know, like just being able to do that for developers. Like I've worked on development teams where that would have been a huge plus, being able to deploy out to the target environment, see it actually running in the target environment and suss out problems there without affecting all the other developers that are trying to do their stuff at the same time. So, you know, that is just one call out I wanted to make here real quick. So anyway, sorry. So I've got my internal record here, osticketdev.nvisia.io. And what I'm going to do over actually on the Cloudflare side, and just to kind of to bring this back, I have a Cloudflare tunnel deployed in here. So I have access to the Cycle network, internal network. I have my tunnel configuration here, and you'll see that I've added a published application route for my osticket-dev nvisia.io that matches the internal that I set up that pointed to my container deployment with the tag. And you'll see over here, and don't let the 7777 throw you off. I could have just put it on 443 or 80 and would not have had to do the port. But I am running it on 777 inside the network. So anyway, all I need to do is leverage the Cycle out of the box. You just have to enable it, but the Cycle internal load balancer that we have, and then Cycle does the rest of the work from there. So I mean, this is now exposed to the public internet through the Cloudflare Edge. So we get WAF, we get all kinds of different, you know, the Mark had the slide a little bit ago about some of the benefits we get out of using Cloudflare. And not that it really matters, but this is like the site. You guys can go to it right now if you wanted to, but you'll be hitting our dev beautiful IT support center PHP application. But this application, when you request this and hit this is actually going through the Cloudflare tunnel, through the Cloudflare container, and then into the Cycle environment internally, and leveraging the Cycle networking components such as the load balancer and resolver and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, one fun thing, you sent when you had things up, you sent me the link to that dev one, and I clicked it, and it was open so fast it was obscene. I mean, it was. And okay, so I'll contrast that with what because this used to be, you know, running on Proxmox, same stuff internally on our other stuff. It took a few seconds to load. I'm not kidding. I thought there was almost something wrong with it. The screen was just up right there. So part of that's obviously some of the help that we're getting from Cloudflare, but everything's the responsiveness is just pretty insanely good.
One last comment real quick before I quit sharing and turn it back over. we do have two containers here, and I just was talking a little bit about DNS and things like that. So obviously this application talks to the MySQL database. And one of the really nice things is just out of the box with Cycle, what you get is for cross-container communication is just you can use the container name with like the .cycle at the end of it. There's a little bit of nuance to that, but just high level. You use just the name of the container .cycle, and it will resolve using the internal resolver. So you'll see like all I had to do, I didn't have to do any kind of setup or configuration or anything. I literally just said, hey, I know what the name of my container is for the database. So I just pop on .cycle to the end of that, and then don't have to worry about any kind of private DNS entries. I don't have to do any kind of wiring up or anything. It's just the name of the container .cycle, which is another kind of nice feature that I like. So anyway, with that, that's our very simplistic dev environment at this moment for this ticket app anyway.
One thing that's worth mentioning here, and I don't know if you have it set up on this environment, but one thing that is possible as we're on the topic of on-prem private cloud in this example that we're showing is the ability, if you did use Cloudflare, to skip the IP assignment on the load balancer. So if you go ahead and click over to the dashboard there on the horizontal nav, and you might have this enabled. So scroll down, and yep, so you have an FDO. That's fine. So if you click manage next to that load balancer, I just want to show that the checkbox is only selected for the IPv6. You'd actually be able to deselect both of those in some scenarios. And now you don't have to worry about getting public IP addresses for your load balancers if you're in a situation where gaining public IP blocks is becoming limited. And I think if you're looking 2 to 3 years in the future, we're seeing continued constraints in there. And while Cycle is pretty modern on the IPv6 side, we haven't seen tons of movement from the world as a whole on pushing that forward. So in a situation where IPv4 becomes even more scarce, you are able to set up on-prem clusters using this model without needing to have tons and tons of public IPv4 blocks for your load balancers. So just wanted to mention that as it kind of relates to this.
Yeah, and then at the same time, one thing that I want to kind of draw attention to for people who might be on the webinar and have not yet seen Cycle is, Bruce, if you scroll down just a little bit, I want to show that kind of pie chart. So the important thing here is that all of this, I know it's been mentioned a couple times now, but all of the applications inside of this environment here are running in a rack that is in your office right now because it's your internal applications, and so you have all the Cloudflare functionality, but it's on quite literally a rack in your office. And so those two servers there, if we want to click into any of them, just being able to quickly show that Cycle is able to do health checks against those. We're able to see all the metrics from those checking in, and so just being able to connect to any infrastructure and immediately build your environments on top of that, regardless of where that's running. Want to make sure that people had that visibility.
Yeah, I mean they're just servers in our server room that Mark plugged a flash drive with the ISO image in, and then they show up here like it's kind of like magic.
Thank you. So let's see, is there any other questions that people have submitted? If not, any questions that are currently out there, we'd love to dive in.
I'm seeing the recommendations for the CUI CTL and things for the CLI. I suppose CC is out of the question, huh? Yeah. So anyway, that looks. I like that one. That's pretty good.
I do too. Alex is asking. Well, this is back to the CLI. Alex was asking, is it Swagger spec? I believe so.
The API.
Yeah, the API,
It's open. It's an open API spec. Yes, we don't
open API.
Yeah.
And then I think we were generating the CLI off of that.
We're generating the clients. So the Golang client
Yeah.
and the TypeScript client are both generating off of the spec, thanks to Mr. Matoni. And then he's using the Golang client as the base for the CLI, from what I remember. And yeah, it's about 50% or so of the way through. And hopefully we will get that out to some people if we see some more renewed interest.
Just turn
One way
Claude
to
loose on that thing.
Yeah, so
yeah, that's what we need.
so I may or may not have been drinking a beer or two a week ago, and I was playing around with using AI to take that OpenAI spec, which by the way is quite the spec. It's got a few lines in it.
Yeah.
Yep. And I was trying to turn that in because I'm a big Terraform person.
Mhm.
I was trying to get started and try my hand in creating like a very bare bones like cycle Terraform provider. So
Mhm.
I was actually just in that about a week ago playing around with that Open API spec. So
There we go.
Well, and I think that's the other reason why we haven't had to build a CLI yet. I know probably 2 to 3 dozen companies on top of Cycle that like spun out their own like purpose-built CLI in less than 10 to 12 hours. That allowed them to like the tasks that they're running all the time, just to fork those off. And so like I think that's probably why it hasn't been such a critical need, because people automate out of it, or they build their own so quickly using that open API spec.
Yeah, so I'll be looking for the cycle provider in the Terraform marketplace there, Bruce. Same.
I believe that's on the schedule. I believe that is something that we're actively looking at. We've had quite a few people, and just want to double mention this. I know that a lot of you that have been on this call already know Cycle pretty well, but for anyone that doesn't, if you have an account, you're able to participate in cycle.io/community. And we take a lot of the content there, aggregated against private conversations that we've had with end users, and use that to deeply influence the direction of what's most important next. So we try to take the influence from our current user base and what they need as the way to kind of guide priority. So please participate there.
Chris,
if that's something you
Chris,
really want.
one thing I wanted to throw on top of that was I've been absolutely amazed at how well the Cycle folks respond in their Slack channel. So if you start having an issue and working through some things, they're very quick to jump in and help you out with stuff. And that's been a really important part of our journey as well. So just wanted to get that in as we wrap things up here.
I appreciate that.
Try. Yeah, absolutely. And on the other end of that too, I think that we've been working together for a long time now. You've brought quite a few of your projects over here and some of the solutions. And if any of this feels like a project that someone wants to pursue, but they're struggling to find internal resources to pursue it, nvisia would be a great choice, for handling some of that implementation. So if you don't have Mark or Bruce's contact already, I'm sure that will be a part of this follow-up email that's going out with the video as well. So great team. We've had a wonderful time. I even had the chance to speak at one of their conferences, which was an absolute blast. And for those of you who are wondering, because this has actually been asked to me like 3 or 4 times, their company was created before NVIDIA, and because they say, oh, I'm searching for nvisia, and I keep getting NVIDIA. nvisia came first, 30 plus years around. So
yeah, one of my classmates was he was employee 19. He's their senior vice president of engineering. It's been they actually they technically did exist. And at the time, we actually were switching our name from another company that we started with originally from STR. And so anyway, the history is that I sent Dwight an email saying, hey, dude, we're a professional services company in, Chicago. We're not trying to, get involved with anything with the graphics cards at the time, right? But in retrospect, maybe I'm thinking, well, because you do get that. People type it in and say, did you mean NVIDIA?
Someone in a marketing master's degree case study course will at some point study the SEO impact of naming too close to a prominent, but
Oh yeah,
you
it's
guys
not good.
have such a
It's
storied history that I feel like you definitely don't have any trouble getting your name out there.
no, it's mostly people that have worked with us talk. It's referral, that vast
Yeah.
majority of what we do. So anyway, cool. Well, I think we're over here. I want to thank everybody for coming, and you guys. It's been a great time. Chris, anything to wrap us up?
I think that's it. Everyone should expect to at some point to get a version of this webinar. We might do a bit of editing on that just to make sure that we're getting the most important pieces. And you'll get an email. I believe that most of the presenters here will be included as far as contacting them if you need to follow up with any of them. Look out for more webinars in the future from the Cycle team, and hopefully the nvisia team joins us back for a couple of those. I know that it's something that we want to get a little bit more aggressive with. If you have feedback for the webinar itself, if you have sat through this and you enjoyed yourself, if you were hoping to hear something else or more details on something, our Slack channel is a great place to give us feedback, and or the community. We would love to hear from you on the process and how it was for your team. Other than that, that's all I have, unless Jake or Bruce, you have something.
I don't. Just it was fun to kick off webinars, and I'm excited for many more of these.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.